a series of workshops ahead of the next AU-EU summit, in particular on the issue of what we believe could be a new regime or a new era of trade and investment partnerships between the two continents. That was one example for me was the declaration between South Africa and Europe on the South Africa EU summit that was declaring that we would explore a new type of clean trade and investment partnerships. And we really believe that this is something that is worth putting substance into beyond a very interesting declaration. The basic thing that we try to do in Ukåmå, but in particular with this webinar, is to ensure that the priorities of African countries are really listened to particularly to develop the partnerships between the two continents on green industrialization. And in particular, I think it's really a statement from these variety of think tanks to say the agro-food sector matters very much in green industrialization pathways. Sorry, that might be an obvious for the colleagues working on the African continent. But a lot of the partnerships on green industrialization seen from Europe are still very much focused on hydrogen, critical raw materials, and we really insist on saying the agro-food processing is very important. There is a wealth of literature and empirical evidence about the fact that food processing as the trigger of industrialization is very important, both because it provides decent jobs for people who have been active in the agricultural sector, but also because there is something to be built upon in terms of the informal sector that is existing. So this is something that I believe we want to really insist on. I will not be longer. I just wanted to thank very much His Excellency Ibrahim Mayaki, Monsieur le Premier Ministre, merci beaucoup, to have joined this seminar to give a keynote. And after that, you will be in the very safe hands of my colleague Catherine Kilelou to facilitate the conversation between the different speakers. Monsieur Mayaki, Monsieur le Premier Ministre, je vous en prie, please, the floor is yours for a keynote introduction to this webinar's session.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Tayer, and please don't call me Excellency. You know, I arrived in South Africa in 2009, and I had a few months after my arrival a visit to President Mandela. And he hated the expression excellency because he said, what is the criteria for calling someone excellency if he has not demonstrated what is excellent? So since then, I really have adopted the same posture. I don't like excellency. Anyway, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be here. And all of you are much more specialized than I am in that field. So I was wondering which would be my added value. So I'll try to see if I can bring an added value. I'm motivated for that, so I think it's a good starting point. And I have 7 minutes, I think, Catherine. So my first point will be contextual. Let me precise that I'll be speaking from the perspective of a policymaker. I'm not a researcher, I'm not a scientist, but from the perspective of a policymaker in that domain. And from the perspective of policymaker, I think there is a good consensus today in the continent that green industrialization is the path to go in order not to repeat certain errors of past industrialization processes. Even if, as policymakers, we do think that historically, and in the history of economics, there has not been yet an example of green industrialization. So we are in a kind of virgin space in terms of policy making. And in a virgin space of policy making, the critical dimension is evidently innovation. And I think it's an important point to mention. At the same time, in the perspective of policymaker, you know that you are in a virgin space, you know that you have to innovate, and you have a certain number of constraints which you need to tackle. And the first constraint that any African policymaker will have to tackle for the next 20 plus years is job creation. I like to take the example of a medium African country of 20 million inhabitants, demographic growth rate between 3.8 and 4, 70% of our population in rural areas, median age of 19. That brings you on the employment market every year between 250,000 and 300,000 cohorts of young. So you can't employ them in the public sector for all the reasons that you know, and you cannot employ them in an incipient industrial process. So what potentially can be a source of employment, it's agri-food system transformation. And as a matter of fact, if we look, for example, at West Africa, and the numbers are quite similar in other regions, 40% of the jobs are in the food economy. So when you get that, you sense that in order to tackle this challenge of job creation, and as Sebastian Treyer was saying, food processing should be at the core of the design of your industrialization strategy. And that's the first point I wanted to make. And policy-wise, what does it need? It needs evidently coherence in terms of the mechanisms that you use. And let me refer a little bit to the mechanisms that we currently have within the continent, and some are strategic frameworks of the African Union. We have the CADEP processes, which you know, which are about agricultural transformation, agri-food system transformation. That's the appellation we use now. And so we have a Kampala instruments. And in Kampala, we have an instrument called the agri-food investment programs. We have the NDCs, which you all very well know. We have industrial policies, which are linked to the Africa Industrial Strategy. We have a Continental Free Trade Agreement, which looks at the movement of people and goods and looking at trade in order to increase intra-Africa trade. So whatever we look at in terms of whatever we look at now, when we think about policy design regarding green industrialization and investment opportunities in the agri-food sector, we have to keep in mind this matrix of several policies which are not always linked coherently. So from the perspective of a policymaker, coherence is a very important aspect. Third point is the long term. Coherence needs to be built in a long-term perspective. And that long-term perspective needs to be reflected institutionally through the organisms that we have, the different ministries. But when I say institutionally, it means that they also need to have interactions with farmers' organization, civil society organization, and the private sector. And when we refer to the private sector in the continent, as you know, 80%, 70, 60 to 80% of our economy is informal and composed of small and medium, micro, small, and medium enterprises. 80% of the jobs in the continent are in micro, small, and medium enterprises. So when we think about green industrialization, about investment opportunities, we need to think about this segment of micro, small, and medium enterprises, because they are the ones who will create the jobs, will adapt the technologies, and who will produce food. Let's remember, 80% of the food we eat is produced by small-scale farmers. So small-scale farmers will need to have science in their pocket, technology in their pocket, and will have to be able to access to finance. And finance is my fourth point. ODA, we are in a post-ODA era, and we have to be very conscious of that. And in the debt issues, we know where we stand. And the world markets do not allow many African countries to access finance given the constraints that do exist. So the way to go is domestic resources mobilization, which means a more intelligent fiscal pressure, because let's also remember that in terms of fiscal pressure, we are the region of the world which has the lowest fiscal pressure for many reasons. I don't have time to elaborate because I'm already at 8 minutes. So finally, recommendations two. The first one is capacity building. We are talking, as we talk about green industrialization, we're talking about technology, and we are talking about implementable technologies, and we are talking about technologies that can be owned by those who will implement the strategies regarding green industrialization, and that needs capacity building. Second point, second recommendation, it's thinking about the ecosystem, the technological ecosystem and the institutional ecosystem. And there also coherence needs to be built. Institutions, specialized centers who work on technology need to make that technology digestible. I don't know if you say that in English, but it has to be digestible and accessible. And the institutional ecosystem is, governments cannot do that alone. They have to partner. They have to partner internally and they have to partner externally. And evidently, that cooperation with Europe in that context of partnering is an important point. And I will stop here because I'm at 9 minutes and 40 seconds. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Maki, for those insights. Of course, I allowed you the leeway for the additional minutes because I know we have some speakers that didn't show up. So it's okay that you took extra minutes to just make your points very clear. I think the 4 points you've raised and the two recommendations are well taken. So I think this is a very good way to set the scene for the conversation that we're going to be having. My name is, for the participants, my name is Catherine Kilelu. I am based at the African Center for Technology Studies. We are an inter-regional science, technology, and innovation focused research and policy think tank. So this conversation is really in the heart of what we do at ACT. And I'm so pleased to be moderating this session this afternoon. To all the participants that are joining us, thank you very much and welcome. Given the time that we have, I would want to welcome you to also maybe tell us where you're joining us from. And also importantly, please, if we don't get the time to ask questions at the end, could you kindly use the chat box to raise any questions or comments as we go? So I think we will just jump right into it because the context has been given. Sebastian has done a good job to just contextualize how we came to this place. We've been working a lot on, there's a lot of work around green industrialization in the region. But we have seen the value, and I think Mr. Mayaki has made a very good case of why agri-food processing becomes very central to this whole conversation around green industrialization. So we want to have this conversation with the esteemed colleagues who have agreed to be part of this panel. Very esteemed colleagues, rich panel of people from government. We have people from industry. We have people who I would call connectors, intermediaries of both public and private sector actors. And so we are going to have a very interesting conversation. The whole essence of this is really to move us towards actionable points and to not only just think about what the challenges are, but what do we do now moving forward to really begin to action what we are going to be discussing today. So without further ado, I'm going to be inviting the speakers to just take about 5 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes to just begin this conversation, looking at what are the opportunities and maybe the challenges from the vantage point of where you're coming from, given what you do. Where do you see the concrete opportunities, especially around making investment and aligning, as Mr. Mayaki has mentioned, making those alignments, whether it's at the policy level, but also at the industry level. So what are those opportunities in a very concrete way that can really drive this agenda of greening the agri-food system, agri-food sector through driving more processing? And then what are those ideas that you could then also share with us from the work that you're involved in terms of addressing some of these challenges that have been mentioned, capacity issues, financing, market access, enhanced coherence with the policy. So I want to invite the first speaker with us. We were expecting to be joined by the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture and Animal Resources from Rwanda, but I understand that there's been some emergency that has come up, so he's not able to join us. So at this point, I would like to invite Regis Meritan. I am not sure if I saw him, if he has joined us. He's the head of sector for sustainable value chains development from the European Commission under the Director General for International Partnerships. So Regis, if you have joined us, I would give you 6 minutes to just share your thoughts with us and then give us some concrete recommendations.
Catherine, he's not here yet.
Okay, Regis is not in. Okay, great. So we'll just move on to the next person. So Dr. Tadesse, the floor is yours. Dr. Tadesse is joining us from Academia 2063, and he is the Interim Managing Director and Director of Policy Intelligence from Academia. So Dr. Tadesse, please, the floor is yours for about 6 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and nice to meet you all. My name is Gato Tadesse. I work for Academia 2063. So I was thinking about how this green industrialization, what are the challenges and opportunities for Africa? It's already said by Mr. Mayaki that we have a lot of momentum going on in Africa. But to start with, I think one of the critical challenge from my perspective is the knowledge gap, the knowledge we know, how much we know about this green industrialization, both in terms of technology, in terms of also opinion thinking, like for example, our mindset. Where is, how do you really perceive this green industrialization? There are so diverse views about it within the continent. Some may think that this is not our agenda. It's an agenda for the global north, and some may think that this is not really an immediate priority for us, and all those things. So, and I think those are some of the issues that are really evolving around, and we don't have also evidence. Unfortunately, for example, large-scale investments on green industries, how feasible? we know that solar technology is very feasible, and we know those things. But in terms of agro-industrializations, how really those things are feasible and all those things. So the knowledge gap is one of the critical issues that we can address. And then the other one is the market. Market for green products are very fragmented right now. And I mean, most of them are at small scale levels. So scaling these best practices and bringing them into the bigger value chain and all those things are the other challenge, and also policy challenges. But in terms of opportunities, I think we can see a lot of opportunities in Africa for green. One of the issues is that the low cost of replacement. I mean, you know that the level of industrialization in Africa is very low. That means that new small, medium enterprises are coming in. So they are coming with new ideas, new innovations, and with the state-of-the-art technologies. So unlike those industrial countries where they have gone far and they have to replace their industrial systems and all this towards a green and very clean technologies, for us, we are just starting from the scratch, then we can easily adopt the new and very clean technologies from the beginning. So, I mean, we didn't have evidence, but I mean, conceptually, it looks like it's a low cost of replacement will be an opportunity for Africa to adopt these green technologies and also engage on green industrialization. One is that. The other one is the young population, because as I said, this green industrialization is knowledge intensive and it requires new technologies, innovations. And then the young people are more, I mean, more I mean, acquainted with this new technology. So our population is highly dominated by the young people. So that creates an opportunity for Africa to engage in this agro processing, which is green industrializations. And the other one is, I think, the finance, the carbon finance, the climate finance issue. And there are a lot of opportunities for climate finance, and all of them are just like very much friendly with this green products and all those things. And the policy momentum, I think Sardin already said that there are a lot of policy momentum going on in Africa, including the CADAP and also the bioeconomy strategies. Many African countries, I think now I know South Africa, Namibia, and also Ethiopia more recently, they adopted new bioeconomy strategies, which is a good opportunity for, I mean, boosting this green industrialization. So with these opportunities and challenges, I think there are some actions maybe that we have to think of. One is on, for example, the partnership between EU and African countries, especially on research and development, evidence generations among think tanks and also among institutions engaged in technology generations and all these things. That will be really an important area of partnership, because I think some of the EU industry and all those things are a little bit advanced than the African. So we can learn a lot on technology transfers and knowledge and all those things. This is one area for collaboration. And the other one is harmonization of trade policies and standards, because some of the green products, they require a standard, I mean, special standards for trade to happen and special metrics to measure. So those areas require some harmonization between the two countries. And also, I think from African perspective, we need a very bold action towards for encouraging green investment. Right now, it's not very clear the incentive mechanisms for green investments. So I think governments and also institutions, we have to think of bold actions on creating, I mean, very incentive compatible incentive systems for the private investments. I think these are some of the things, and also awareness creation. I think right now the willingness to pay for green products is very low, but if we are having a targeted awareness creation, especially for young people and urban consumers and all these things, those can create really a lot of opportunities for increasing the willingness to pay for green products that will translate into a high level of private investments. I think these are some of the policy actions and partnerships that we need to enhance green industrialization in Africa and the globe as well. Thank you. Over to you, Katri.
Thank you very much, Dr. Terese. That was very insightful, talking about the gaps that we have in terms of knowledge, understanding the technologies that are available, how we can scale this technology. So And I think the action points you mentioned are quite relevant to seeing how we can then address this in a very concrete manner. So I want to invite Boaz. Boaz Kezire is joining us from Agra. I'm not sure if it's Agra, Nairobi, but if it's Nairobi, I think karibu sana. Boaz is currently the policy director of policy and state capability at Agra. So, Boaz, you've been listening to the opening remarks. You've also heard what Dr. Tedesi has mentioned. So maybe you can just add to this conversation from your vantage point at Agra. Where do you see how this green industrialization in the agri-food sector plays out from the work that you do? And what are you seeing as the opportunities, the challenges, and some ways we can concretely move this agenda forward?
Thank you so much, Catherine. I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Very well, yes.
Yes, I'm joining from relatively cold Nairobi. So greetings to everybody and thanks for everybody who has joined this call. I'll be very, very brief because most of the fundamental issues and points that needed to be raised have been touched on by both the keynote speech as well as my colleague Tadesse. And I just want to basically draw from the reference that Dr. Mayaka has mentioned, and to some extent that Tadesse has also raised around the whole issue of agro-industrialization, greening industrialization. And I think for me, it all revolves around one key thing, and that's what I would constitute as a huge opportunity. When we talk about green industrialization, the investment opportunities, one of the biggest opportunities that I want to draw from is that for Africa, the agenda has been set. And it's as recent as January 11th, when our heads of state agreed to the commitment that is enshrined in the agri-food systems transformation agenda that was agreed in Kampala. Everything that it requires in terms of the direction, the vision has been agreed and set by our leaders on where the continent needs to be, at least for the next 10 years. And I wanted just to draw everybody's attention to the commitment number one that the leaders made. And in that commitment, they made three key things. One, in fact, I would just think that there are three commitments in one of the areas. That one is about creating the necessary volumes of agricultural goods and services, both for food security, but also for informing and being part of the raw materials for industries. So the commitment is about how do we increase the volume of production of agricultural goods and services on the continent. But within the same decision, leaders were very, very clear. They emphasized the need to agro-industrialize. So the statement is there, and there is a lot of information and background information that informs that particular commitment, knowing where Africa is coming from, producing raw materials for the rest of the market in the rest of the world without really increasing the opportunities for processing, value addition, and therefore creating jobs. So that's where that particular decision is coming from. But in the same decision, beyond production productivity increases, and also talking about agro-industrialization, leaders spoke about trade. That while it is very critical to increase the volume of agricultural goods and services, agro-industrialize, meaning that you are really adding value and making opportunities for jobs, you need to enhance trade coming from the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and tripling intra-Africa trade. So I think that agenda has been extremely very, very clear, and we need to appreciate and benefit from it in that context. And if you look at the entire 6 commitments that the leaders made, for me, the one that I've strictly speaking to this particular topic and discussion of the green industrialization, I run to commitment number 5, which is talk about building the resilience. Because we need to understand that the opportunities lie within the mitigating issues related to climate change. Today, we know that advancing agri-food systems on the continent is going to be affected, probably it's an opportunity as well as a challenge, affected by 2 things. Either the climate that is consistently changing, the kind of deforestation that happens, degrading wetlands at the expense of increasing food, we are going to be disrupting the climate and therefore reducing the potential that we can actually increase this food production. So that's the piece of the greening that comes in, that while you pursue agro-industrialization, you have to be careful about not disrupting the environment that can actually disrupt the ozone layer and therefore be able to really either create a lot of climate change-related issues. How do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions from what Africa is? The numbers have been clear. I don't want to repeat them here. And that's very, very critical. And I think related to that, within the commitment number 5 that heads of state made, that's what I mean by the opportunities already established, is about building the resilience of smallholder farmers and even medium to large scale farmers, beyond smallholder scale farmers, building their resilience to be able to adapt to the challenges that are happening. We all know where we've come from. Disruptions in supply chains raised by either the Russia-Ukraine crisis and the current crisis that we are seeing in the Middle East and elsewhere. We begin to see that those supply chains were disrupted. But to the advantage of Africa, the coping mechanism and the response has been much stronger than we ought to have thought. So that's again a huge opportunity for Africa, that the ability to recover and respond from the shocks can be much faster if those resilience capabilities are built in terms of road infrastructure, in terms of trade infrastructure that can really help build the resilience of smallholder farmers as well as medium to large scale farmers. And as I finish and I conclude in this speech, trying to be very brief, we have to really be able to understand the whole issue around the governance of the whole and understanding. So beyond my commitment of saying we have the agenda has been set by our leaders, the commitments are extremely very clear, but the biggest challenge raised around what Dr. Maya talked about, the whole issue around capacity and institutional building that requires to take this to the next level. I think that's where, for me, I continue to see a big challenge. And leaders were very clear about this when they committed on the Kampala Declaration. If you look at commitment number 6 around the governance of the food systems, it's coming from the history of agri-food system transformation on the continent, where countries that have advanced in terms of putting strong governance instruments, mutual accountability mechanisms, ensuring that there is a regular peer review mechanism amongst leaders and actors within the country, ensuring that the strong results are helping to create the right investments, is going to be very, very critical. So I want to believe, Catherine, that the challenge is not the absence of the technologies, is the institutional capabilities required to take up these technologies to bear to work. And I think I really want to congratulate the research fraternity globally and in Africa, the CG centers, the national research systems. They have brought on board sufficient models of technologies, let it be seed technologies, let it be fertilizer technologies, I think, that are even responsive to climate change. But I think the biggest question is the institutional and policy gravitas that is able to take these commitments to the next level. I think that's where it is. And with that, then we should be able to see in the next 10 years where leaders have been able to make these commitments to make sure that we can realize a greener environment, a very strong agro-industrialization, better jobs for young people, where everybody is actually in the prosperous economy, both within in the country and outside, and also we're able to see trade happening across the continent. Let me just leave it at that and be able to respond to any comments should there come at the end of this discussion. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Boaz, for also continuing to set the scene. As you've mentioned, the agenda has been set, the commitment has been made. What we want to see is how that commitment really is operationalized. And I think if we come back here 10 years from now, we can be able to say that we did this, that, and the other to really move this needle towards a more industrialized and a more greener continent that is creating jobs, as somebody has mentioned, that is creating opportunity for small and medium enterprises, and that we are seeing a robust structural economic transformation in the continent. I think this is a very good segue to really bring people who have boots on the ground. I think we've heard from the policymakers, we've heard from people who are working in regional institutions and the researchers. So I want to now just hear from the voices of people who are actually trying to do these things in reality. I have the esteemed pleasure of now inviting Joyce Gemma, and I think she's also the only woman panelist. That's another discussion. But yeah, Joyce is also based in in Nairobi. I know her as a serial entrepreneur. She has worked on so many things, but in the context of this, I think she'll be talking about what she sees as opportunity for actually industrializing through the food sector, and what does the greening really mean from where she sits. Joyce is the managing director and founder of TradeCare Africa Limited. So Joyce, please take it away. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine, my fellow panelists, and the participants in this webinar. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to participate in this discussion because it's an agenda that's very close to my heart. I've worked in the agri-food sector within Africa, not just in Kenya, across the Eastern Africa mainly, but also in countries like Zambia, Mozambique, and a bit of Southern Africa, both in the export segment of the market and also in the domestic market. So I'll be talking from the perspective of where I see the private sector fitting in. And I feel really happy listening to Boaz. I'm excited to hear what the agenda that has been set is. But also I'm cognizant of the fact that realizing this agenda requires very strong private sector participation. So I'll be talking about the role of private sector, the understanding of the private sector, the challenges the private sector faces, and how we see opportunities or solutions can be found. So if you look at African agriculture, it's really driven by small and medium enterprises. We've got a large-scale segment of the market, that's production and also processing, but majority of the actors are SMEs. So we have to think in the context of Africa being a continent that is driven by SMEs. How do we realize green industrialization? Because we must industrialize, we must transform our agriculture. How do we do that? And from the work we've done, my perspective is that the silos and fragmentation of the entire sector is probably the most limiting factor to achieving the agenda. From policy perspective, ability to consume research, ability to even position ourselves in the market. We keep talking about the market opportunity, how big is the market for green products, but there is opportunity really for SMEs in Africa to be able to position themselves and to communicate better and to create those opportunities. We don't have to sit back and wait for those opportunities to be created. So how do we see this happening? A lot of the models that we've interacted with are really still models that follow the fragmented approach. So we try to support individual entrepreneurs, individual enterprises, without really thinking that it's very difficult for these enterprises on their own because of their size, because of their capacity to bridge the knowledge gap. So what we see opportunities for more aggregated, and I hear this conversation now happening, more aggregated service hubs, more aggregated agro-processing hubs, where multiple SMEs are working together, which allows for upscaling in terms of investment, upscaling in terms of access to capital, and the like. But how can that happen? We've always talked about, kind of the legal institutional frameworks that are necessary to allow entrepreneurs to be able to work together. And that requires robust quality management systems, the policies that drive the private sector, not just certification, but the policies that allow businesses to co-create and work together. We have co-working spaces, but we can't have co-processing spaces. I see that happening in avocados in Kenya. And the reason why the avocado sector has been able to explode is because today you have 10, 15 entrepreneurs using the same processing facilities. So even though the companies that are building the processing facilities cannot utilize their full capacity, they build extra capacity and are able to harness opportunities by allowing other SMEs to process in those facilities, which allows joint certification, which allows upscaling of infrastructure in those facilities, which allows investment in better, kind of infrastructure. So and these models are also in tilt. We see these models coming up, and we believe that interventions that drive African agriculture should actually be interventions not at the level of SME, even though SMEs are the drivers, but at the level of infrastructure that can be utilized by multiple SMEs. Now, we are at the forefront of promoting that within the agro ecosystems where we work. Alongside the infrastructure investments, which allow investment, for example, in solar infrastructure, biogas, regenerative farming, that's reuse of waste to input cycling. If that is at an aggregated level, then you can have aggregated level of services. My experience is, and I've worked with over 300 SMEs, businesses at different levels. It's very difficult for these businesses to onboard and sustain the capacity that is required to interact effectively in this space. It doesn't mean that we do not have the capacity existing or we can't build the capacity in the continent. So rather than competing on capacity, the businesses have to realize that we need to move to pre-competitive collaboration. So you have service hubs that are able to work with multiple businesses. We are in the information age. There is nothing today that a company can claim to own in terms of knowledge or intellectual property in agro-processing or in whatever agro-production, because that knowledge and information is there, and we need to share that information and knowledge. Therefore, promoting service hubs that are able to work at different levels with the businesses would be a quick way of kind of putting up multiple SMEs. So what solution do we see as probably something? We are testing that in Kenya, looking at services using digitalization, services and sort of service hubs where multiple companies can aggregate and access the same services, which allows them to hire better professionals, which allows them to lower their costs, which allows them to access the best possible services. Then alongside that, we don't have to build, to litter the entire country with small processing facilities. We need to move into contract processing facilities, contract logisticians, contract and quality management systems where you can have accountability across the chain. So that will allow for new innovative financial instruments like green bonds to finance green industrialization, new market opportunities. For example, we've been discussing with buyers in the Netherlands on a lot of consumers are concerned about water use in countries, for example, that produce avocado. But we are saying probably we need to brand our avocados as rain-fed, which enables us to really bring out these components of our production, because it means then we can differentiate from the countries that are utilizing a lot of water growing avocado. Those conversations need to happen at the level we are so that we can be able to differentiate in the market. I think generally what I'm saying is that because the biggest problem in my perspective is the fragmentation, the siloization of agriculture, then the solution has to be aggregation. But then how do we make that aggregation work? How do we make aggregated services work? How do we make aggregated processing work? How do we make aggregated logistics work? So I see those as areas that can really sort of, if effectively implemented, pull up the capacity of the African agro-industries and enable us to take advantage of the emerging opportunities in Africa. I believe the regional market will be the most interesting market in the coming years. Thank you, Catherine. I don't want to go beyond that.
Yeah, thank you, Joyce, for that. I think thought-provoking intervention in the sense that, yeah, let's think, how are we going to do this at scale, and what are those models that we can begin to think about that are not fragmenting us further by saying that we have to work maybe with individual enterprises. So very thought-provoking, and I think that's also another interesting segue. But I still want to encourage the participants. I'm told that we cannot use the chat function, but if you have any questions, comments, Please go on the Q&A box and send us your thoughts, your comments, questions. And I think we will probably have some time later on to interact with the participants and the questions that they're raising. So with that, I think I would want to turn the attention to Mandla. Mandla Ukåmå is the CEO of Partners in Food Solutions out of, I think, Pretoria or Cape Town, not sure. You can clarify that. But yeah, Mandla is also boots on the ground, working with actually agro enterprises and the industry to really look at how we scale up food processing in the continent. So Mandla, I'd really like for you, building up from what you've heard. What are you from your vantage point, obviously, where do you see the challenges, the opportunities? How do we create real partnerships for us moving forward from this conversation? So Mandla, welcome.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Catherine, for the invite, first of all, to this very timely conversation about how do we imagine or reimagine green industrialization for the agro-food sector on the African continent. I'm joining today not from Cape Town or Pretoria, but actually from Bulawayo, which is in southwestern Zimbabwe. And it's equally cold but sunny, like Nairobi. I think it's important for us to probably locate this conversation on what our erstwhile keynote Mr. Mayaki said, that we are living in a post-ODA era. And I think that's the realization that most of us, have come to at this point, realizing that the case that we're making for green industrialization, first of all, will need to be anchored not only in what local governments themselves do, but also what the private sector does. And therefore, if we're going to have sustainability and scalability, which I think are very essential in both cases for this issue, we are going to need an active private sector model that allows for this transition to happen. And thankfully, we've got our friends from the European Union on this call from various countries. And, I don't think I'll be speaking out of turn when I indicate that if you look at countries like Germany, if you look at countries like the Netherlands, if you look at countries like Ireland, there is models where, there's been the right kind of, enabling environment, which has allowed for the adoption of green technologies across many industries. And I think the advantage we have on the African continent, just like we did, I think, with mobile telephony, is that we can skip some steps. We do not have to go through the unsustainable approaches, because technologies that are renewable in nature, that are therefore giving us options from a green industrialization perspective, are readily available, and from a cost point of view, are becoming cheaper and cheaper. So our organization, Partners in Food Solutions, has been working with private food processors across the African continent for over a decade and a half. And in that time, we've been in and out of at least 2,500 small and medium scale food processors across a number of African countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And in the last 2 years, we've started asking ourselves this very important question to say, with what we are seeing in the factories that we support, what could a transition to the use of green technologies for existing processors look like? And like my sister Joyce did say, there's a whole range. You've got the tiny mom and pop shops like Posho Millers in Kenya, all the way to big processors like Spice World in Nairobi and so forth. But yet all of them use energy. So the one thing that is very clear is that agro industrialization is going to be an energy intensive process. So if there's an opportunity for green industrialization, it's going to be in how energy is going to be provisioned for these industries. Now, not every country is endowed like Kenya with geothermal, energy and hydroelectric power. If you're like in the DRC or Mozambique, a lot of the places across the continent, accessing power from the grid is a nightmare. And we are seeing this across all the countries where we work. So the companies that we support are saying to us, right now we've got two choices. Either we rely on an unreliable grid, or we make huge investments in generators, which normally use fossil fuels, as the only way for backing up our energy. The reason being, the solutions that are renewable in nature for large-scale industrial or even small-scale industrial operators are not well put together and therefore are not readily available. I'll give you an example. We've got a client in Uganda who is pasteurizing eggs, turning them into pasteurized liquid eggs and also powdered eggs. That factory runs during the day exclusively on solar, but it's got no storage because he can't afford the storage. All he does is every time he's got a bit of money, he puts a few more panels on his roof, and that allows him to run his operations during the day. And the reason why he's not able to move into the storage bit, which would allow him to almost run exclusively off the grid, is because of a lack of two things. Number one, most of the schemes that are proposed are grid-tied schemes. Schemes that are saying, oh, you need to have a little bit of access of power from the grid, and then you can have a bit of renewable as your backup. But what this entrepreneur is saying is that I know the grid is unreliable, therefore give me a solution that is completely off the grid. So number one, from an engineering and technical perspective, there's not enough packages that are very specific off-grid solutions that are fit for purpose for processors that we are supporting. The second bit, which I think is very important, is if you are putting yourself off the grid, you're essentially building your own power station using solar, right? Now, all of us know that no one builds a power station from cash. You build a power station from loan. From loans, you cannot really use your working capital to build your own power station. So what's missing is the financial instruments. The financial instruments that recognize that renewable energy infrastructure, which is so important for the green transition, requires long-term finance or finance that is fit for purpose for that reason. And what we're finding is that there is a gap in the marketplace. People will readily provide finance for many other things, but there's a level of nervousness around creating products or financial products that make sense for people who want to use renewable energy on an industrial scale. So our experience has been that what we need to do as partners in food solutions is to provide sufficient information for both the engineering or the technical side to design these systems by indicating across different value chains what are some of the processor types, what are some of the processing, the different processes that you need to go through, and what is the use or the requirement for energy that these processes have, and make this information publicly available. So to that end, working together with our colleagues at SNV and GAIN, which is the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, we've actually are busy right now conducting a study, which is an energy audit that will generate, in our view, a comprehensive picture of what the energy requirements, for example, for processing maize, for processing rice, for processing things like avocados into oil and so forth, and create, hopefully, what will be a benchmark to then say to people, if a company is doing this end product, the processes that they're going through, whether it's grinding, whether it's milling, whether it's packaging and so forth, these are the actual energy requirements. And therefore, if you are going to be designing a product for these companies, this is what you need to know. Because we did a comprehensive study of available literature and so forth, it was confusing. On one paper would give you a certain level of energy use for a maize miller, for example, and another would give you a tenth of what the other one showed you. So we say the best thing is we've got the audience, we've got the companies, so let's go into the companies, do the audit, and we hope that we can share that with an audience like we have on this call so that people have a good view of what the energy requirements are. The second thing that we are doing is working with the likes of Root Capital and others is to say, what does the funding instrument look like if we're going to help a factory that uses, for argument's sake, a 50 kVA transformer at the moment and runs 24 hours a day, if we're going to help them to transition to fully renewable. Again, I think you need the right kind of finance. And we are hoping that, and I heard my sister Joyce talk about green bonds and so forth. I think these are the kind of financial instruments that I think if they start flowing to impact investors or to impact funds, it's really going to give the kickstart that we need for the sector to transition. In closing, I want to say that there's a number of opportunities. And I think Joyce mentioned this, that not only is there opportunities around the use of things like solar, but I think there's so many waste streams in agriculture or agro-processing that are currently not utilized. If you drive through the rice growing areas of Malawi, you'll see mountains upon mountains of rice husks. They are not being used, not as animal feed or not as a source of energy. Liquid or gasification plants could be a very good option for those areas where people are already energy poor. And in Malawi, you'll all see the amount of degradation that charcoal production has created. And yet there's enough agricultural waste that I think could be used to power not only domestic but industrial use as well. But you also have the issue of contamination of water. A lot of the agro-processing that we come across does lead to waste streams ending up in our water sources. And within those waste streams, there's often a lot of nutrients that could be the basis for the production of biogas and other sources of energy. But again, is there enough technology solutions and is there the right kind of funding for them? That's where I think the opportunity is. And for us as PFS, we're really trying to lean into that space of providing sufficient information of the energy needs, but also helping to create some of the financing instruments which we think can be useful to move things forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandla, for that elaboration. I think you went into that whole direction of the technology, designing some of these solutions in ways that are fit for purpose, given we are talking about a huge range of small and medium enterprises that are trying to get into this space of agro-processing. Then you came back to the issue of financing in what now is being called the post-ODA era. And how does that look like? So how do we crowd in the necessary financing that is very alive to the context in which these enterprises are emerging? So I think this is a good way to then introduce our next speaker. We had Will Higgins from Baka Fund, who was also going to elaborate a bit more on the financing side. But he's not been able to join us. So I will call on Anthony. Anthony, I knew I was going to butcher your name, but so I'll skip it. But Anthony is a senior partnership manager with the IDH, working on transforming markets. So Anthony, please give us your perspective, given the work that you do with IDH. As I said, I think you're one of those that I would call an intermediary of sorts, the one who brings different people together to try and really make things work. So yes, could you please share your perspective and give us some really concrete things that we can take away from this conversation?
Yes, of course, Catherine, and thank you to the organizers for having us. Actually, we got in touch with this group via the EU Africa Hub. So I'm very happy to have been listening also to what's been said so far, and also to be able to say that we partner with some of the organizations represented here, or partners of the partners. And I heard, for instance, SNV, a Dutch organization that we are in the process of making a memorandum of understanding with. And Mr. Ukåmå, you mentioned some of the important things that we need to be working on more, stuff that we don't, as IDH, focus on. But if everything is, of course, interrelated and connected. So when you mentioned issues having to do with energy and water, these are very important, well, points of work. Also for us IDH, who have a very clear focus on agri commodities. So that being said, my name is Anthony. I was born in Africa, in the DRC. I've been working mostly in the development sector for all of my professional life so far. And I work as a partnership manager. I joined IDH only a couple of months ago. So my strength is very much in bringing organizations from public, private, or academic sector, NGOs, and so far together, which is one of the core, I think, competencies of IDH that was created in 2008 only. So in that sense, we're still a startup, but working in all over the world, and in Africa, mostly in Africa, in I believe 9 countries for the time being, and looking at, for instance, also DRC to be working more with. We at IDH, we very much believe in markets. We have really a vision that our agricultural markets, where economic activities, really economic activity, is at the heart of change. Change needed to nourish people, to nourish, I'm sorry, societies and our planet. And that is why we try really to leverage the power of trade, global trade, to make or to help creating better jobs, better incomes, and a better environment, and equity, equity for all. So that is really what we do. We work on these outcomes: income, better jobs, better environment, and gender equality. And so maybe to get to the issue that I was asked to prepare for a little bit, and also again referring to what's being said by the other speakers. I don't want to be repeating too much of that, but I do underline, or I want to really yeah, follow what's being said on the importance of capacity, institutional capacity, of course, the idea of not having a fragmented approach, but really also focusing on pre-competitive collaboration, leapfrogging technology. I remember that is when I was at the UN Global Summit for Sustainable Development in Johannesburg in 2002. That was an important thing, also leapfrogging technology. So that is, what is it now, more than 30 years ago. So it's been a while that it's time now to make that really happening. So maybe for another 2 or 3 minutes, we think at IDH that again, facilitating access to input financing. Input financing is really key. Like we are working on with our partners on blended finance models to enable farmers to have access to, or to purchase certified seeds and good quality inputs instead of relying on recycled seeds or seeds of lower quality. We actually we work with local financial institutions as well, local institutions and off-takers to create better purchase agreements, de-risking also lending money to farmers and SMEs. So strengthening SME business management, and it's been said that is such a large proportion of the economy, informal economy mostly. So strengthening this by continuing to provide for coaching to SMEs, coaching on financial systems, on accounting and compliance standards. Like many SMEs who have a very good turnover of often a couple of millions per year still have old-fashioned accountancy systems like working with Excel or even handwriting. This is something that we need to make better and that we see good progress in. But also expanding market access and offtake security. We have developed this model with partners that is called the Growing Together model, in which we support SMEs and processes with agronomic support. Again, trying to work on improving the quality of the product, the hiring the yields, and making for corporates, for the private sector, the supply chains more reliable. So in doing so, we really try to promote more inclusivity and fairer value distribution. Like instead of exporting, for instance, cocoa beans for peanuts to Europe or America for that matter, and having the real profits being made not in the countries of origin where the commodity is produced, that is unfair value distribution. So we also look at shifting from middleman dominated value chains to more direct sourcing models, giving farmers fairer prices, and also build longer term, it's been said also, longer term loyalty-based supply relationships. So maybe to end it here, I'm happy to be part of this as IDH. I think we need much more partnering. This is really the key. Like I heard of convening in at all levels, like global, national, working more pre-competitively. These are things that we do. So do reach out to us if you don't know us yet. Please reach out to us, and I can put you in contact with specialists, not generalists like me. Both to do well convening and talk of solutions and the way we work with partners, but also investment. We have a huge investment fund that we use to de-risk investments that, of course, are key because in agri-commodities, investments in that are not so evident, and so helping investors to step up and invest their money into it is a very important leverage that we contribute to happening more. I will maybe end it there if that's okay, Catherine.
Yeah.
And yes.
Yes. Thank you. I think you've touched on many important aspects, especially what was mentioned earlier. How do we make sure that as we think about industrialization, that the supply chain is still also an area of focus, ensuring the raw material is coming and coming on a regular basis, and its quality, but also the professionalization of our SMEs, making sure that they are able to run their enterprises in a professional way. But obviously, we are really trying to zoom in on this issue of greening our industries, and what opportunities are presented by that. Kind of trajectory that everybody is going now on making sure that we are doing it, we are industrializing, but also in a way that is taking advantage of the green, whether it's green energy and other aspects, including water. And I've seen questions that are being raised by participants. I want to invite the last but not least speaker of the day, and hopefully we keep to the 7 minutes. Then we can obviously open it up to the participants, look at their questions so that we can respond to them as much as we can. So our last contributor of the day is Thierry Latriel. He's the coordinator of the Agricultural Public Development Bank Coalition at IFAD. So I think you bring in an interesting perspective also from the organization that you are part of, but also looking at it from a public bank perspective. So what is it that you think needs to be looked at, and what are the opportunities, especially to drive this agenda on greening industrialization of the agri-food sector? So Thierry, over to you.
Many thanks, and I'm honored to speak today as the coordinator of the Agri-PDB platform. This platform is hosted in IFAD and co-led by the French Development Agency. We are representing the FIX Coalition for Sustainable Food System and the UN Food System Coalition of Public Development Banks. And indeed, all the precedent speakers already set the scene and mentioned many different challenges, and I will here mainly advocate for the central role of national public development banks in these different challenges. We serve as a hub for PDBs interested in sharing best practices, and our network includes about 140 members, and primarily national PDBs from the Global South. What has been stated by the precedent speakers, where will I start? Green industrialization in Africa's agriculture is about transforming the entire value chain sustainability. And for financiers, this means two important things. First, this must be part of a clear overall agricultural financing strategy. And without well-defined choices on agricultural models and strategies, funding risk being inefficient and ineffective. And here, maybe we could link also to the remark of Boaz from Agra, and your conclusion also of the need to operationalize a national strategy, and PDBs are in charge of a part of its implementation in the country. Second, making financing decision requires specialized agronomic and technical expertise. This expertise helps create tailored financial products that fit the specific technology and needs of farmers. And I would give the example of Peru, where the public agricultural bank, Agrobanco, has developed more than 500 customized financial products. But such a comprehensive approach demands significant investment in skilled staff, technical studies, support services, and stronger partnerships to succeed. Financing the transformation cannot rely on traditional short-term loans, as it had been mentioned by Mandla or by Anthony. It needs long-term patient capital tailored to farmers' reality, and this is exactly where national PDBs can play a critical role. They have a unique comparative advantage. They can mobilize long-term concessional and de-risking capital to flow into rural areas and agricultural value chains. This is vital because green industrialization as a long-term investment requires financing with longer maturities and which traditional banking often cannot provide. As mentioned by Joyce, the role of private sector here is also essential, and PDBs can also make the link with either private financial institution, private banking, commercial banks, and the financing of the private sector. Agri-PDBs can grow in private investment, blend concessional and commercial finance, and structure public-private partnerships to build resilient green value chains. And they are financing high-risk yet high-impact innovations that commercial banks often avoid. Their role is to structure financing aligned with national development priorities. They need to support value chains, foster technical and financial partnerships, support vocational trainings for stakeholders, and back innovation, especially research and development of adapted equipment. Unlocking green growth means embracing digital tools, fostering agroecological practices, supporting smallholder farmers with accessible, affordable financing. And that's a need that we have that has been reported to our platform from our members in terms of priorities and services that the platform should offer. We have financial inclusion tools in to build a taxonomy of their loans in climate or agroecology. Effective green industrialization in agri-food requires coordinated efforts among all stakeholders, and this partnership and cooperation has been also highlighted by the preceding speakers. So, but it needs also a global offer, including professional training, strong links with research and development, as mentioned by Dr. Tadisi, reliable data, agricultural clusters and agricultural markets, and the trade issues have been mentioned also. Good governance involving also the Chamber of Commerce. In this broader ecosystem, the national public development banks can act as connectors, linking finance with science, innovation, and policy, and ensuring that green growth national strategies are inclusive, locally adapted, and data-driven. They are the catalysts that will make it happen, bridging finance, technology, and people, and this beyond only a ODA perspective, because we are at a national level, and the cooperation with also DFIs and ODA providers is essential. They help connect smallholder farmers, cooperatives, and local SMEs to scalable green solutions through dedicated credit lines, technical assistance, and strategic planning. At our level, at the Agri-PDB platform, we notice a rising awareness of these critical challenges from the project manager for the national PDBs. And we are proud to participate to the building of this community of PDBs representative and foster the partnerships needed to make Africa's agri-food sector a global leader in green growth. We are working also to enhance collaboration with regional institutions, enabling a public development bank to access new resources and strengthen their institutional capacities. And one of the important achievement of our platform is to foster peer-to-peer exchanges, connecting national PDBs to learn from each other, share experience, and build stronger and more resilient agro-food system together. Thank you.
Thank you, Thierry, for that intervention. Very insightful also from the financing perspective and some of the things that we can leverage from public money to catalyze what private sector really needs to unlock the opportunities that are available. Yeah, well, I think I'm just looking at the time. I knew this was going to happen, that we would have very interesting conversations and not have enough time to really cover the whole ground of what we wanted to discuss. Many interesting questions have been posed, issues around examples. I think, Mandla, you talked about what you're doing in very concrete ways, working with industry, but maybe something to maybe highlight is, how public-private partnership plays out in some of these things that you're supporting, or some of the enterprises you're supporting. I think one of the things that has mentioned also is the issues that Joyce mentioned about the fragmentation of whether it's investment or interventions that don't look at the way all these issues kind of come together. So whether it's the issues of energy, because this is a big highlight for what we are discussing, aspects of capacity building, technology access, some of the issues somebody has mentioned that we haven't pointed out, the challenge of food loss, I think as part of the larger focus on agro-industrialization and greening it, especially in terms of looking at opportunities for using waste streams to turn them into maybe energy sources. So Mandla, or everybody else, I think I want to invite people to just say in 30 seconds, what is the main take home? What should we take out of this so that we have some concrete things to follow up on, not just have a conversation and stop at it. So Mandla, could you just 30 seconds?
Well, I think what's very clear from this conversation is that partnerships are going to be key in moving us forward. I think a lot of the actors on this call all have a component of the answer. And I think it's about how do we turn a conversation like this into a concrete set of interventions where we all bring our collective expertise, opportunities, and energies to showcase some solutions. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Anthony, 30 seconds.
Well, no, I think Mandla is very, very right. It all starts with real people and real places. So connecting and opening up and stepping out of the comfort zone. I know that these are things that are being said all over the place, but what I feel is that with the changing landscape, with all the problems related to, national interests first and shrinking ODA spaces and tariff issues and so on, that the momentum is much, I feel that it's much more there than ever before. So I really want to reiterate that working together, bringing together expertise is key, and looking at progress that is happening, because there's a lot good stuff happening. We need to keep an eye on that as well, and not only look at problems, but see the opportunities again that markets can bring us. Markets can do a lot.
So yeah, we need more showcase of things that are really working. So I think we can do that very quickly. Yeah, Thierry, what are your quick take home in 30 seconds?
I would also mention the great cooperation between all the stakeholders in one country, and mention the central role of national PDBs, of course. But we have also good examples. For example, Mike in Malawi, TADB in Tanzania, La Banque Agricole of Senegal, BNDA Mali, the Bank of BRD in Rwanda. And we can also take the advantage of this and sharing this experience. Why did it work? Why did they manage to promote sustainable practices, and what was the global political environment? Who was involved in this good experience?
Great. Yeah, Joyce, I don't know if you can do it in 30 seconds. We're already a minute late, so we really have to wrap up shortly. And Bruce, I hope you're getting ready to give us a final wrap up.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. It's been a very insightful and interesting webinar. And my takeaway is the importance of new business models that allow us to scale rapidly and to take advantage of emerging opportunities. and the fact that, yes, there are emerging opportunities, but maybe we need to accelerate how to match the moment to those opportunities.
Tadesse, your quick take home.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, I think my take home, the role of the private sector is very critical for this industrialization, green industrialization. But at the same time, the policy commitment is also critical, especially for policy coherence. We have different policies. We have to really make sure that they are aligned each other. And more important is implementation. And we have a lot of commitments and a lot of strategies everywhere. But I think we have to build our capacity, improve our commitment for implementation. I think that's my message.
Yep. I think the question was raised about that. Thank you very much. So, Bruce, I don't envy you. I think we now give you the honors of giving us a quick summary of what we can take from this, and zooming in on really action points, because we don't want this to end as this conversation here. We want to see what can we take home and action from this conversation. So, Bruce.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you very much to everybody from the panel. It's been, indeed, we've been trying to cram a lot of interesting topics into one short conversation. I mean, it's an honor, but also a challenge to try and sum up. So I just have four points I think that I wanted to make. And I think the first goes back to what not His Excellency Mayaki said at the very beginning. There are a lot of policy frameworks, essentially, which could be used to underpin this whole green industrialization relation. And if we think about Europe, Africa also. And I think he mentioned CAADP, PIDA, there's the IDA industrialization agendas, the AFCFTA. But of course, the point is that these are not enough. So these provide a sort of a broad framework which people can then fit into. And when we get into the sort of the African dynamics underneath that, we know we've got the RECs, we've got national policies and strategies, and then there are different projects and support mechanisms that we've heard about today. So I think the point is that the frameworks are there, but shouldn't be seen as an end. And I think that's what many of the panelists have brought back, is the need to then think about ways of turning these into reality. And maybe the point that's been made several times, but is worth underlying. So the second point is the importance of the private sector. And I think when we talk about CAADP, when we talk about these regional levels, we're very often talking about policymakers and what we could call sort of policy supply. And what we really need to also think about is the policy demand. So who are the private sector actors, who might benefit from this? But I think to get more traction and implementation, as the last speaker just said, it also needs to be about private sector utilization and actual, what do they need from this, in fact, if we're talking about trying to promote green industrialization. So that's partly about sort of linking with digitalization and services, as was mentioned. It's partly about these different business models. I thought the point that was being made earlier, I think it was Gloria, was it Gloria? We were talking about market differentiation and sort of rain-fed avocados. So there are a range of opportunities then that different types of firms could be using, but in which case they need these policy frameworks. But these two things sort of need to come together. And if we're talking about sort of green industrialization opportunities, then these things need to sort of be combined. The third point then, I think, is, I mean, we've talked about this actually with the colleagues from IDDRI, is about what we mean by green industrialization. And in fact, the conversation was quite rich, because on one hand, there was an element was about green production, so how to make production and processing more sort of, or less carbon intensive, how to ensure more renewable energy, how to make better use of waste products. So there's an element of green production. And on the other hand, there's an element of green products. So in fact, some of the things that we're talking about that could come out of agricultural production in Africa, what we're really talking about are sort of adapting production zones to where they make most sense. And in fact, if we take the avocados again, there are certain areas where it makes sense to produce these, and they can be done in a low carbon, low impact way, as opposed to other economies where this is sort of the water scarcity means this doesn't make sense. I mean, nobody talked about green freight, but I think this is a bit the point. We can think about decarbonizing the production and the processing. We can think about producing green products for sort of the global market, which would kind of help others or reduce their own footprint. We can also think about green products for the African market. And I think that's where we begin to get down then into sort of trying to overcome some of the barriers between economies. And Professor Mayaki talked about the AFCFTA, and I think this is where the links between the CAADP framework and the AFCFTA come back again, and we can think about those. So the fourth point then, and in a way, the final point is a way the challenge that she's raised through all of this is essentially around coordination failures. Or coordination challenges, let's put it in a more positive way. And that sort of operates between levels. So we've talked about these continental level policies, but there are also direct level policies. Then there's also the national level policies. But it's also between different groups, between government and private sector, between farmers and firms, between financiers and farms, investors and locals, between states, between agencies. And I think, of course, the broader framing that we started with here was also between the EU and Africa. And I think the point about sort of raising these is not to say, therefore, this is all impossible. But I think the point needs to be how to find more bottom-up ways of bringing these different actors together and addressing specific challenges and bottlenecks that then help realize these different frameworks that we've looked at. And one of the things which has been kind of mentioned in the terms of infrastructure was around sort of corridors. And I think that's one of the things that we've started looking at even at ECDPM, is how to link climate change issues with the agri-food dimension, with trade and with infrastructure. And basically these sort of trade corridors essentially are ways of trying to combine the policy dimensions kind of around a specific area and overcome these different hurdles in terms of promoting investment, overcoming some of the policy barriers, creating a market within the region, and therefore sort of helping kind of come to some kind of virtuous circle that can maybe help sort of bring some of these ambitions to light. And I think this way of sort of bottom-up thinking about regional markets and how to sort of promote green industrialization around this sort of way of framing is perhaps a good way to start sort of thinking forward. And I think that's interesting in as much as it also aligns with two big African ambitions, two big ambitions, one being on the EU side, the global gateway, is very much focused on corridors and I think investment and how to overcome sort of coordination failures around those corridors. And then, of course, on the African side, whether it's PIDA or the AFCFTA, corridors have also been a long-standing priority. And I think maybe this is a way to combine these angles and think about green industrialization, particularly in the agri-food sector. So that's a bit my very brief summary of what has been said and trying to think towards a future agenda. And of course, this is a platform, hopefully, which will continue. So it'd be interesting to follow up on some of these with the people present.
Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bruce. I think this is a conversation that I find difficult to stop, but we are beyond our time. But it has also showed that there's a lot of interesting things that we need to continue this conversation, and not just a conversation. I think what we want to do is really find those concrete things that we can start doing to move this agenda forward. So on behalf of the people that organize this webinar, my colleagues from IDDRI, ECDPM, from ACTS ourselves, and from the other, from AKADEMIYA2063, I really want to thank all the participants. I have to apologize that we didn't get to your questions, but we're going to curate them and we're going to find a way to really summarize the conversation that came to this from the panelists. And we're going to be sharing the output of this conversation. But we want to also commit ourselves to ensuring that this conversation continues and those concrete actionable points then are taken up and something really starts moving towards the actualization of this agenda. So I want to really thank you all for making time. I thank you for the panelists for agreeing to come and being part of this and for your time to just share your insights, which have been very eye-opening, at least for me. So really thank you for taking the time. So I would now want to just say that we will be sharing the summary points from this conversation, but we'll keep this conversation going. So thank you so much for your time and for your participation.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Absolute pleasure. Cheers, everybody.